Luckily for us, our NBC News team has been talking to some of those key voters. We will hear from them in just a moment, but we do begin with Chief White House Correspondent Peter Alexander in Grand Rapids with the Vice President. Garrett Haake is following Donald Trump and has a look at how the former president has struggled with some traditionally conservative voters. Trymaine is in Philadelphia, where Democrats have been working to register more black voters. And Yasmin Vossoughian will join us in just a moment. She has been talking to Lebanese American voters in battleground Michigan. Peter, I have to start with you. First of all, congratulations. Big get. You just spoke with the vice president moments after her Michigan event this afternoon. What was your key takeaway, Peter?
I think there were several takeaways. It was a short conversation as she was heading off to two other stops here in this critical state of Michigan, obviously, where she is trying to win one of the blue wall states. She has to likely win all three of them. Wisconsin yesterday. She'll head to Pennsylvania soon here. And one of the questions I think that has been outstanding, Kristen, has been specifically focused on how she will be different than Joe Biden going forward. She's cast herself in recent interviews, including the one with Fox News, saying she will not be a continuation of Joe Biden as president. She says they have different views of the world, among other things. They come from different generations. But I pressed her on that specifically to try to pin her down a little bit more clearly about exactly where those differences may lie. Take a listen. What is one policy that you would have done differently over these last 3.5 years than President Biden?
I mean, to be very candid with you, even including Mike Pence, vice presidents are not critical of their presidents. I think that really actually, in terms of the tradition of it and also just going forward, it does not make for a productive and important relationship.
He's now given you that green light with his comments that you can carve your own path. So now that you have this ability to say that to be on your own?
Well, no, going forward, there is no question that I bring my own experiences and my own life experiences.
Is there a policy that stands out to you in particular, either?
Sure. I mean, my approach to what we need to do around Medicare covering home health care, born out of my experience of taking care of my mother. My priority on housing, one, because I know what it means, affordable housing and the ability to buy a home. Again, my own experience, my mother saved up, and not until I was a teenager was she able to do it. But also I know that for so many young people who I speak with around our country, the American dream is just really out of reach. So my policy about $25,000 down payment assistance to help them get their foot in the door. The work that I have been doing and will bring to the presidency around emphasizing small businesses as being part of the real backbone of America's economy. Those are the experiences and the ideas that I have that are about moving forward and really in being a part of the next generation of leadership.
So, Kristen, as you heard in that exchange, she was reluctant, due to her loyalty, as she described it, to say anything critical about any of President Biden's policies over the course of these last 3.5 years, which does put her in a bit of a unique position right now. Increasingly, as I've spoken to undecided voters, including in places like Michigan and in Wisconsin, where I was just yesterday, they have asked specifically what might be different about her than is about Joe Biden. And it comes against the backdrop of polling that we have found and has been seen across this country that most Americans think the country is headed in the wrong direction right now. That's under President Biden's leadership. So specifically where those differences would be. Other takeaway I would just raise for you right now, and I asked her about the gender gap specifically. She leads among women, according to our recent poll, by 14 points, down among men by 16 points. I asked her why she thinks that is, why she thinks there is a disconnect. She said, in effect, that she doesn't think she's doing all that poorly with men. She says, look around, there are plenty of men here. She says that's not her experience, that she's having a challenge among men. But I will tell you, at the same time as she is saying that, her campaign just today shared information about how, for the first time, it is targeting men more aggressively on some of the places where they are, including some of those popular platforms, including sports betting sites like DraftKings, now advertising there for the first time, sports news sites, fantasy sports sites. They've also been advertising in recent weeks to try to target those male voters and some of the college football games, the NFL games, and Major League Baseball playoff games as well, Kristen.
It really is a significant shift, Peter, that we're seeing in terms of their outreach targeted toward trying to energize and mobilize male voters around her. Peter, I think you pushed her more than we've seen so far on that very critical question, and you're absolutely right. A lot of undecided voters really want to hear her answer that question. So to hear her talk about Medicare and housing, I think will be very significant to a lot of voters. Peter, congrats on the great get. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll catch you on Nightly News tonight. Garrett, let me head over to you. We saw Donald Trump on Fox and Friends today. He has, frankly, spent time this week mostly with friendly media. What are your sources telling you about what this basically means for his strategy in this home stretch?
Yeah, Kristen, look, it's always a little bit challenging to tell what Donald Trump is thinking, but in this case, very easy to see what he's doing, and it's all consistent. He is doing everything he can not to put himself in a position where he might face even the kind of follow-up questioning we just saw from Peter with the vice president, much less what the vice president went through with her interview with Bret Baier. All of the interviews he's been doing have been friendly. This long sit-down on Fox and Friends. He's been doing various podcasts and canceling interviews with NBC News and with CNBC. It looks like prevent defense, to use a football metaphor here. You might give up big chunks. You might give up the opportunity where he does, take questions at a gaggle or that kind of thing, but never put yourself in a position where you might get really put on your back foot. It suggests to me that the Trump campaign, either one of two things or possibly a combination of both, either thinks they are winning this race, perhaps quite narrowly, or thinks that the biggest risk to them at this moment is Donald Trump being significantly pushed in front of a large audience to say something he shouldn't. They are trying to sort of avoid both of those possibilities with a strategy that largely has him just talking to big crowds like the one that's starting to gather behind me here in Detroit.
Well, Garrett, you're so right about that. And as you've been speaking, we've been watching him at a campaign event there in Michigan. He heads to Detroit next. Garrett, talk a little bit about the significance of this. Obviously, Detroit, deep blue area, and he made some pretty eyebrow-raising comments the last time he was in Detroit.
Yeah, and this has been such an interesting thing to watch, Kristen, because Donald Trump actually did better in Detroit proper in 2020 when he lost than he did in 2016 when he won. He has improved his standing in urban areas, in part by appealing more to Latino voters. He's making tiny but somewhat significant, given how close all these margins are, gains with African-American voters. In Detroit, he has been trashing the city sort of conceptually, saying it's, if you don't vote for him, every city in America is going to look like Detroit. But I got to tell you, I was talking to some Trump supporters earlier today who said, yeah, we get that. We understand why people think we have this problem here. Harris is using those comments against Trump in other parts of the state. I'm not as convinced it cuts against him as badly as it might otherwise appear here in Detroit.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Garrett. Let's talk about some of the great reporting you've been doing on the ground, talking to Mormon voters who could, quite frankly, make all the difference in key swing states. What are they telling you about the state of this race?
And Kristen, this is a subgroup of voters I've been fascinated by ever since I covered the Romney campaign. Reliably conservative, small c, in basically every possible way, but in many cases heavily motivated by the character of a candidate. They seek moderation. They seek consensus. It's a church characteristic. It's a characteristic that is sort of passed down through their leadership, and they have broken from Trump sometimes in significant ways during the Trump era and from other Trump-associated politicians. We saw some of that divide and that angst about how to balance their faith and their conservatism in some interviews I conducted in Arizona last week. Listen to this.
He is a statesman. He is very respectful. What he's doing right now, he's a politician. He has to appeal to the voters. And so he has a personality. But again, I'm not voting on personality. I'm voting on policy.
So, Terry, I'll pick up with you on that point. I sort of see you reacting out of the corner of my eye.
I think Trump's a character, but I don't think he has any character, would be the way I would describe it.
Can you square your conservative principles with a vote for Kamala Harris?
So there is one conservative principle that I hold very dearly that is going to push me towards Harris. That is the rule of law and the peaceful transfer of power. Trust me, I wish there was another option. I wish Nikki Haley was on the ballot. I would be very enthusiastically supporting her. But I have Trump, and he's not an option based on my principles.
Kristen, Joe Biden got 18% of the LDS vote in Arizona in 2020, a state that he won by 11,000 votes. You do the math, that's the margin. So this voting bloc, although small nationally, could matter a great deal in some of these Western battlegrounds in particular.
It's just fascinating to hear from them, Garrett, and to hear her, the last woman you spoke with in particular, talk about Nikki Haley, because you think about what will decide this race, and in many ways it's those Nikki Haley voters. So fantastic interview. with them, Garrett. Thank you so much for bringing that to us. Trymaine Lee, let me turn to you. You're in my hometown of Philly at a voter registration event aimed at black voters. Talk to me about what voters there are telling you. Are they feeling energized? And just a little bit of strategy for folks who aren't familiar with the key to winning Pennsylvania. Part of it involves driving up turnout in Philadelphia and the Philadelphia area, right?
That's right, Kristen. Here in our favorite city of Philadelphia, go Birds. Talking to black men in particular, not just voters and not just Eagles fans, but black men about what they care about most, what issues they'll be carrying into the polling places with them. And a few things emerged. One was that as men, they want to feel solid and whole and have opportunities to be able to provide for themselves, provide for their families, and provide for their communities. But also, as we speak to how much attention politically has been shown down on black men, there's also been a lot of browbeating, as many of them, a growing number of them, a small but still growing number of them, are still trying to figure out which of these two politicians serve them best, even though for some it seems obvious. But I gathered a group of guys here, everyday guys, who talked to me about what their motivations are. Check it out. Do you think one of these two candidates, whether it's Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, are best positioned to help you in that kind of situation?
Right now, I'm leaning more towards Kamala Harris in that regard.
How about you guys? Which was y'all leaning?
That's what I'm going with.
How did you land on Kamala Harris? Was it a process, or did you know all along?
Definitely was a process. I mean, hearing certain things that I heard, certain feedback that I heard, or what she was trying to get to the community, research, and to help us or whatever. You know what I mean? So like, we're still going to have a battle. It's going to be a long road ahead of us.
The message here for black men, especially in North Philadelphia, a very black section of this city, is that folks should feel comfortable participating in the process. And so if you're on the sidelines for whatever reason, they're not telling you to vote for one or the other, but they're saying, black men, we want to hear your voice, get involved, and register to vote.
And it echoes kind of what we heard from former President Barack Obama when he had that stern message to black men. Basically, don't stay at home, don't sit this one out, get out and vote. And that's just a part of the outreach we have seen the Harris campaign make to black voters and black men in particular. How is that being received in Philadelphia, Trymaine?
There are a couple things here. One thing that I've been hearing all across this country this entire election season and in Philadelphia is that black men want to be heard, want to be acknowledged, and perhaps most of all, want to be respected as men, as more than just a pathology, as more than just folks who are incarcerated, as more than just people who are most likely to be victims of gun violence or perpetrators of gun violence. Come to us as whole thinkers. And so now that folks actually are engaging with intentionality around black men, saying, black men, we want to hear your concerns and we want you to vote for us. We don't want you to take for granted. That's been a pretty resonant message here, especially when another thing you'll hear time and again is that politicians will come around when it's time for elections and they'll ask for your vote, but then you never see them again. And the quality of your life in your community doesn't change. The job prospects don't change. Nothing changes. So they want to see you face to face as a politician, hear your piece, and have to choose.
Well, Trymaine, great interviews and great reporting as always. Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Yasmin, let me head over to you. You were in Michigan this week talking to Lebanese American voters. They feel as though their community has been neglected. What was their message to you, Yasmin?
They literally told me they feel like second, third, fourth class citizens, that the only time in which folks actually want to hear from them, right, that they spend time with them, these politicians, these lawmakers, is when they want their vote, when they want to retain power in Washington. But in the interim, in the 4 years between these presidential elections, they are forgotten. And they feel as if the war in Gaza, the war in Lebanon is reflective of that notion, of that feeling, right? These are people who every day are checking in with their family, for instance, in Beirut, and wondering if they're still alive. One of the individuals I spoke to talked about how his entire cousin's family died just a couple of days ago, and he found out via telegram. His grandfather's house had been bombed and no longer standing. They are feeling this in a very visceral way, this war, and they are voting with one issue, Kristen, in mind. Let's take a listen to more of what they had to say, and then we'll talk on the other side.
Who is voting for Donald Trump?
in 24?
It's possible.
It's possible.
Yeah. It's definitely not by Harris, that's for sure.
Who's voting for Kamala Harris here? Absolutely no.
No. Not possible.
There's nothing she can do or say for us to change our mind.
Who's voting third party in 2024?
Good chance.
So Jill Stein. Mm-hmm.
Most likely. It's also a possibility that someone else will just abstain from voting altogether, but we do know that that's not the best political strategy.
The campaign that the Democrats ran was that Donald Trump hates us. I felt safe, though, in the country when Trump was in office. I don't feel safe right now with Kamala in office.
I was hard-pressed, Kristen, to find a Harris supporter that was willing to go on camera in the Lebanese community. We talked for days with folks, some of which were voting for Kamala Harris in this election. But they compared it to 2016, when many people in the Arab American community didn't feel comfortable talking about the fact that they supported then Donald Trump, then candidate Trump. And they feel as if now, if they're voting for Harris, they will be ostracized and or targeted in their community. And so they're not being outspoken about it. But the sentiment amongst this community, by the way, 200,000 strong Arab Americans, potential voters in Michigan, really could obviously swing an important state, is that they feel forgotten and the country is broken and they want to see major change.
Yasmin, just 10 seconds. Do you think if there's a ceasefire deal, a release of the hostages, could that change their calculation? Some of the folks who are saying we're going to vote third party,
no,
we're going to sit it out.
No, I mean, I've been visiting Michigan for the last year since the primaries in February. They didn't, they thought about possibly changing their mind then, considering how things were going to play out. 2 weeks out, there's nothing changing their mind at this point, especially considering what they see as this tremendous amount of loss in their communities overseas.
Oh, it's just absolutely fascinating reporting and tremendous interviews. Yasmin Vossoughian, thank you so much.
Thanks, Kristen.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.